My name is Florian, and I'm trying to establish using virtual reality as a research method in usable security and privacy. And I will just talk a bit about, the idea of using VR studies for the research we do within our community. So on the plane to SOUPS, I had, on the plane to Boston to SOUPS, right? I had a look at the proceedings last year. I wanted to see what research method do we actually use in our research, right? And not surprisingly, out of 36 accepted papers last year, more than 20 used online surveys, right? So online surveys are great. We can reach a lot of people from different countries. It's very affordable actually to recruit people, and we can, click, go to bed, 8 hours later, we probably have a huge sample, right? Next to online surveys, we have lots of different research methods, ranging from interview studies to lab studies to ethnographical studies and so on. So there is a lot of stuff out there. Now, talking about usable security and privacy research in the lab, I just picked some random examples here. These are all great works which basically propose a novel usable security and privacy prototype, and they do some user testing in the lab. And often that actually involves physical hardware, and participants need to commute to the lab to interact with these systems. The problem here is that 2 years ago, I did an interview study with a few experts from our community, and the reality is actually, if we do such studies, we are recruiting participants by knocking on the doors of friends and colleagues and be like, hey, come and do my user study, I will give you $10, right? This is reality actually. This is how people recruit participants. And it's really sad because also sometimes the research we do is based on the hardware we have available, right? And I thought about, okay, how can we support and facilitate researchers in the research we do and, push forward in the space we are working in. So what I propose here is basically, instead of having the reality and conducting user research in the lab with physical hardware, we can basically replicate that into a virtual environment, which we call virtual reality, right? So virtual reality is nothing else than basically immersing users into a virtual environment and letting them interact and experience a virtual replication, for example, of a real-world space. This basically means we can create virtual replicas of lab environments, right? So we can still, put users into a lab environment and evaluate our, in this case, authentication method, but we can also create more realistic experiences. In this example here, we replicated an ATM, and we went through an ATM authentication process, and we let participants withdraw cash. So why is this important? So first of all, security is never a primary task, right? So when you go to an ATM, your aim is to withdraw cash, but you need to go through an authentication. And in such a way, we can basically simulate a more realistic authentication environment in the lab through the help of virtual reality. So we, in this virtual environment here, you can see a user, one of our participants, interacting with an ATM, and we evaluate the novel authentication system. But the way in how we present the authentication system is more realistic than, coming to a physical lab, sitting in front of a PC, and then, authenticating. So this is actually what we can make here to really support more realistic usable security research in the lab. So another thing why this is important. So I picked here 2 papers, one from DeLuc et al. And one from Volcom et al. And if you have a look at these papers, both published at SOUPS in 2010 and 2018, they try to understand how people interact and behave in front of ATMs. The challenge here is that if you do this in the wild, you need to consider a lot of ethical and legal considerations, which makes it super challenging to conduct that type of research, right? But what if we can move that type of research into the lab through the help of virtual reality? Because simply asking, financial industry partners to get access to the ATM is probably not happening, right? So now, is VR or using VR, the golden future of what we do? No, obviously not, right? But what I want to say here is basically we have this usable privacy and security research in the lab, right? And we moved that online through the help of online surveys. We deployed APKs. We conduct browser-based studies, and that's a huge success, right? That really forged forward the research we do. And as Redmile says, online surveys or interviews, those are key techniques to understand and improve how human decisions making affect security. So maybe also, as part, like a small bit of the research we do in the lab is actually research that involves hardware and also to understand how people interact with novel usable security and privacy systems. So maybe we can use here VR as a research method to make the same step we did with online service, right? We could transition that online as well, because these days, millions of people have access to virtual reality headsets, right? So if you conduct a user study on a smartphone, for example, you could do the same now with virtual reality headsets. Almost 15 million have access to an Oculus Quest 2 device, right? And I mean, there is a lot of interest these days. So finally, I just want to conclude with a question, and maybe we as a community start thinking about how can we now make use of novel technology to support and facilitate researchers and maybe also transition our research into practice in the end. So maybe you can think about this question with your specific research field. It might be suitable to use VR, it might not be suitable, and I think having access to more research methods beyond more traditional ones can be a way to really push forward the research we do. Thanks a lot. I also want to thank all the institutions, all my partners who funded my research so far, and I'm happy to answer any questions. You can also get in touch with me via email or on Twitter. I'm very happy to chat to you. Thanks a lot.